You good to go, Rachel?
Yep.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to welcome you to the Bluetongue Virus webinar conducted between ourselves, Ulster Farmers Union, and the Department of Agriculture. We basically we thought that this was going to be a useful exercise to let people know what is out there and what we're going to maybe face this summer and autumn. So just to give you some information, there'll be the department will speak and show you slides here, and I just want to do a few housekeeping notes. This evening will be recorded, and there will be links sent out that you can watch the event again. Any questions that you have should be put through the Q&A button, not the chat button, but put through the Q&A button. And we expect this session to last no more than 2 hours. So over to you, David, there.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for welcoming us to your event, and it's a great opportunity to speak to the members at this time of year, as we're just in the final throes of the vector dormant, the vector low period, and we're probably be in the vector active period. So we thought it was a good opportunity to catch up with industry and speak to the members, farmers, about this disease, which is no doubt going to become certainly a concern this year and next year. So we've got a range of speakers. We'll cover everything from what the disease is through to what's going on, the policy at the moment, trade issues, vaccination, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we possibly can. But thank you very much. And without any further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Ignatius.
Thank you very much, David. Good evening, everybody. So we'll start off with Bluetongue. First of all, it's a notifiable disease. Anybody that suspects that they have Bluetongue on their farm or in any of their animals, they have to report it to DAERA. And again, it's an immediate reporting is essential to allow DAERA to take a fast response, basically determine the presence of the disease. Reporting can be done either via your PVP or by contacting your local DAERA direct regional office, or by phoning DAERA on 0300 200 7840. So what is Bluetongue? We've heard an awful lot about it. So it's an infectious, non-contagious, and by that I mean that it doesn't spread directly from one animal to another. It is spread by a vector, which is the midge, and affects ruminants. It affects basically all kinds of ruminants, such as sheep, goat, cattle, buffaloes, deer, antelope, and camels. There are at least 24 different serotypes of classical BTV, and you might as well consider each of these strains as an individual disease, because there is no cross protection from one strain or serotype to a different strain or serotype. So if we're talking about BTV3, a vaccine will only protect against BTV3. It will not protect against any of the other strains. The clinical signs basically can range from asymptomatic, show no clinical signs, but right through the whole way to death. So it will affect, not every animal will die of the disease. Sheep are more acutely affected compared to cattle and goats. But again, as I say, the disease itself basically can cause various signs, and I'll go on to show some pictures of diseased animals. It's not transmitted through contact with other animals or wool or through the consumption of milk. An important point to realise is that there is no public health risk associated with Bluetongue. The meat products, milk is perfectly safe in relation to Bluetongue. It only affects ruminants. The insect vector, Culicoides midges, are the main method of spread, but it can also be spread by blood or by germinal products such as semen. Another important point in relation to Bluetongue is that animals that recover from infection develop long-term immunity for the strain. The incubation period, that is a period from the time that the midge bites the animal to the time clinical signs are seen, are 4 to 8 days. So The vector active season is typically between April and the end of November. So we're not officially in the vector active period, but again, we expect to become in that particular period very shortly. There is an official definition of the vector active season, and we just haven't reached that stage. If the weather was a bit warmer, possibly we would be in it already, but not officially yet anyway. So an uninfected midge bites an infected host. There is the extrinsic incubation period where the disease circulates within the midge itself for a period of 4 to 20 days, depending on the temperature. And after that period, then the midge goes and bites a susceptible host and spreads the disease. And so the disease, that is the disease cycle. It goes from one infected host via the midge to another susceptible host. So again, the clinical signs are mainly in sheep, but they include, shall we say, the 3 F's: fever, face, and feet. And if you remember that, basically that's a nice simple way to remember it anyway. So there's fever, salivation, depression, and panting. Nasal discharge. You can see the picture on the right there, a massively swollen sheep's head. And again, the sheep is pretty distressed looking. Swelling of the muzzle, lips, face, eyelids, ears, and tongue. Ulceration of the mouth. Lameness. And again, there can be there's resulting abortions or deformed fetuses. And again, in many cases, we end up with death. So there's some clinical signs. Again, you can see there the coronary band of the sheep. You can see that very reddened area. That sheep there will be extremely lame with that particular lesion. You can see again crusting on the nose, swollen face, and again the third picture basically shows an extremely swollen head as well. In relation to cattle, basically there you can get ulcers in the mouth. You can get crusting of the nostrils, and again the reddening of the nose as well. And again, you can get lesions on the teats. One of the important things about blue tongue is that in some cases it can resemble foot and mouth. And in fact, one of the first cases in GB way back in 2007 was phoned in as a foot and mouth suspect and turned out to be blue tongue. So what do you do if you suspect blue tongue? Again, you have to contact your local DVO where an investigation will be arranged. There are the contact details. Now, because it's a notifiable disease, AFBI cannot accept aborted fetuses or carcasses from premises where blue tongue is suspected to be the cause of death or abortions. The PVP, if the farmer wants to put abortions, fetuses, or dead animals into AFBI, he will be asked if he suspects blue tongue. If the PVP does suspect blue tongue, well then that information will be passed on to DAERA and we will carry out an investigation. Now, I really want to stress is the vital nature of abortions for surveillance. And again, it's one of the major areas of brucellosis where we need, where one of the earliest signs of brucellosis will be an abortion storm. And again, that's vital for the department and for the farming community. But again, it's also vital for farmers to know what is causing the abortions in their individual farm. So it's important that abortions still continue to AFBI, but just realise that they will not be accepted if blue tongue is suspected. I'll now pass on to my colleague, Nicola Connery.
Okay, thank you, Ignatius and Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to dive straight in here and start by giving a brief background to the disease outbreak in Northern Ireland to date, but I'm also going to briefly describe the outbreaks in other parts of the UK and Ireland, and then I will talk about the approach that will be taken now and for the coming months as we move into the vector active period. So the first suspected case in Northern Ireland was detected in 2 cows originating from an establishment near Bangor in County Down. And this was reported as a result of abattoir surveillance programme, which we had and continue to have ongoing in Northern Ireland. The first case was reported as a suspect case on the 29th of November 2025. And Bluetongue Virus serotype 3 was then confirmed several days later by official reference laboratories. So on suspicion of disease at the time, we put in place a 20-kilometre temporary control zone, or TCZ, around the establishment. And that meant that movements of all susceptible species within that 20-kilometre zone were prohibited. Our staff then commenced tracing of animals which had moved on to or off the establishment from the 1st of September, which our veterinary colleagues had determined as the start of the likely window when the disease would have occurred at the establishment. So then any establishments identified as having received animals from the affected farm were then subject to surveillance and testing if required. And our investigations informed us that the disease was likely to have blown across from GB via infected midges. So if you just click on to the next slide there, please, Stephen. Thank you. So as part of the surveillance testing within the TCZ, further cases were then detected, now all BTV serotype 3. So again, near Bangor, and then 2 near Grey Abbey on the Ards Peninsula. And finally, a 5th case was detected on the 23rd of January 2026 near Portavogie on the Ards Peninsula. And on that occasion, that was actually picked up as part of the pre-movement testing requirements, which we had established to prevent further spread of the disease at the time. So all of this basically meant that Northern Ireland's disease-free status for bluetongue was suspended, and this obviously had a detrimental impact on moving animals within and out of Northern Ireland under EU rules. And this slide just shows the location of those establishments on the map within the TCZ, which was established at the time. A final point just on this map is that we confirmed 5 cases, but we didn't test all farms. So it's very possible that there is more of this disease out there and we just haven't detected it yet. Now, you'll all be aware now that the TCZ was removed, and I'll come on to that again shortly. But the TCZ was considered to have been effective at the time, but was removed for a number of reasons, including that, I suppose, the consequences on domestic trade really outweighed the benefits of the initial restrictions. So if you just skip on to the next slide there, please, Stephen. Thank you. So I'm going to come back to the Northern Ireland situation in just a second, but I want to very briefly describe the situation in Ireland and GB in respect of bluetongue. And I'll just start with the situation in the south first. So the first case was confirmed in Wexford via their routine surveillance in January this year. And then further cases were confirmed in counties Wexford, Wicklow, Laois, Louth, Monaghan, Kilkenny and Kildare. Now, I'm sorry, the resolution on this map isn't great, but it just shows that bluetongue's now prevalent basically right up the eastern coast of Ireland, both north and south. And again, the likely source there was considered to be infected midges, which have blown across the Irish Sea from GB, and all cases confirmed as BTV3 serotype. So next slide, please, Stephen. Thank you. So moving just to the picture in GB, so 333 cases of bluetongue have been confirmed in GB during the 25 to 26 season. So that's basically since the 1st of July 2025, and other cases were reported before this. But these figures just relate to this particular season. And the breakdown of that is that in England, there have been 299 cases of BTV3, 4 cases of BTV8 and 7 cases where both BTV3 and BTV8 were detected in animals. And in Wales, there have been 23 cases of BTV3 so far, and Scotland has not had any confirmed cases to date. So next slide, please, Stephen. So that just sets the scene for the disease picture across the other areas. So I'll just move back to Northern Ireland, and I want to talk about the easing of restrictions and the intended approach now for the common vector active period, which will start, I suppose, at any time now. So back in March this year, you'll be aware the TCZ in Northern Ireland was removed, which means that currently in Northern Ireland, there is free movement of animals subject to meeting the conditions of a general licence, which basically means that there should be no suspicion of disease present at either the establishment of origin or destination. Now, with the lifting of the TCZ, the pre-movement testing requirements which were in place are no longer required. And if any of you are impacted by any of those pre-movement testing requirements, you'll also be aware that Minister Muir had provided financial assistance with the laboratory costs associated with that. And of course, that ended as well with the lifting of the restrictions. So the general licence is available on the DAERA website, and there's a wee screen grab there of the general licence. But I should also say at this stage that also on the 6th of March, when the TCZ come down, we also notified the European Commission that we're now applying a derogation under EU legislation, which has assisted in the resumption of trade with EU member states, including Ireland. But I know my colleague Julian's going to talk about this in more detail in just a moment. So next slide, please, Stephen. Thank you. So as I say, on the 6th of March, we eased the restrictions which were put in place initially. But then following on from that, it's now important that we carefully consider how we manage this disease going forward. And in doing that, we've taken a number of things into consideration and liaised also with Northern Ireland industry representatives on the planned approach for the coming months. So going forward, it will be important that we continue, for the time being at least, to carry out surveillance and respond to reports of suspected bluetongue. Now, this is important for a number of reasons, including to confirm or negate any new disease outbreaks or spread, to facilitate strain testing to determine whether any other bluetongue strains have entered Northern Ireland, to enable farmers to make informed management decisions regarding, for example, whether or not to vaccinate their animals, and to reflect the new direction of travel for managing bluetongue within the EU. And I'm going to come back to that point in a second as well. So we'll continue with our abattoir surveillance, which has been going on for some time. We will continue to respond promptly to suspect cases of bluetongue. And in the event of reports from farmers or private vets of suspect cases, we'll initially restrict the establishment until we can confirm or rule out bluetongue. But more importantly, if bluetongue is confirmed, until we confirm which strain of bluetongue it might be. So if a new case of BTV3 is confirmed, then the restriction on the establishment will just be lifted and it'll be back to the current business as usual, because we know we have the strain present in Northern Ireland. But if another strain of bluetongue is confirmed, then we will act in accordance with our bluetongue disease control framework, but very much taken into account on a case-by-case basis the epidemiological picture at the time. And Ignatius has already explained that there's a wide variation in the different serotypes that can be found for bluetongue. So if we can just move on to the next slide, please, Stephen. So I just mentioned a new approach within the EU to managing bluetongue, and I promise to come back to that point. So bluetongue is currently classed as a Category C disease, but the new EU legislation is coming into effect on the 15th of July, which will recategorise bluetongue from a Category C to a Category D plus E disease. What this means is that there are now fewer legal obligations, or there will be from the 15th of July, there will be fewer legal obligations on member states regarding surveillance and eradication of the disease. And this is really reflective of the European Commission's acceptance that previous legislative and operational measures for managing this disease are no longer effective. but rather the disease should be managed essentially at an EU level. And that means measures should now be put in place to prevent the spread between member states. And I know that's something which Julian is going to go into in a bit more detail in just a moment. But importantly, just as far as you're all concerned, you should continue to follow the guidance on our website, and that currently reflects the approach which we're setting out here this evening. So if you just skip on to the next slide, please, Stephen. That actually just brings me nicely to my last slide before we move across to Julian, because as I've said, the approach that we will now be taking is set out on our website. But any further changes to that approach will be communicated, I suppose, just as we've done so for any previous updates. So we'll ensure that industry representatives remain fully engaged and on board of any further changes coming down the line. We'll ensure that any changes will be communicated just as before to stakeholders via a range of means, so letters, emails, text alerts, or social media channels, and when and where appropriate, further press releases, and indeed any further meetings or webinars if that's what stakeholders feel would be helpful. So the full ambit, I suppose, of the communications that we have at our disposal. And so that really draws my update to a close. And I'll hand over to Julian, I think now, who's going to talk through the trade aspects. So thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, Nicola. Good evening, folks. I'm going to talk about trade, which basically boils down to the ability to move animals, and I'm also going to talk a bit about germinal products. The first thing I want to talk about is the derogations which were published recently by DAFM and DAERA. It's important to realise that these only apply to BTV3, the BTV3 serotype, and different measures would be required if other BTV serotypes were to be detected on the island of Ireland. That would actually scupper the free movement that we have in the minute. Have at the minute, and may lead to additional measures like testing or vaccination. But for the meantime, the derogations that we have published enable movement to occur from north to south, from south to north, but also enable movements from the continent onto the island of Ireland. And that's because EU law does not permit a bilateral agreement, an arrangement that we might have had with Ireland only. And if you open your borders to cattle from Ireland, then equally you have to open them to animals from the continent. So you'll notice that the last bullet point here is extremely important. Please practice responsible sourcing. Ignatius touched on the fact that there are 24 serotypes, and there is active infection circulating in various European countries and even in Great Britain of other serotypes. So every import does present our industry with a risk. And so the main message from this is, yes, wonderful, we've got the ability to move animals north to south, but we also need to be very careful that we don't bring anything nasty and any further problems into the country, if at all possible. Next slide, please, Stephen. Okay, I'm just going to go through the various types of movement that can take place and the various conditions that may apply to those. Much more detail on all of this can be found on our website. So first of all, I'm going to talk about live animals, which is mainly cattle and sheep, obviously. And live exports to England and Wales, well, they're permitted from all of Northern Ireland for direct slaughter and also for breeding and production, with no additional measures such as vaccination or pre-movement testing. We also have an agreement with the Scottish Government that will allow for transits across their territory, and this is so long as any stops are planned, minimized. Basically, they don't really want a consignment to stop in their territory if that's possible. But if they have to, they want it to be planned to take place in a public car park or a service station, or basically somewhere well away from livestock. Okay, next slide, Stephen, please. Yeah, exports to Scotland, that's a wee bit different. If you're just going to Scotland rather than through Scotland, Scotland still has official BTV free status. So they have the ability to apply additional measures to move from Northern Ireland. Moves to direct slaughter are permitted. Any requirements for those, such as the time of day at which the animals are supposed to arrive, those are coordinated by the recipient plant. But it's important to realise that the measures will vary depending on the season. Ignatius mentioned the vector active period, which will increase the risk. So the measures vary depending on the season and also according to the species. And increased measures will be required during the summer, and I'm going to go on to that shortly. Going ahead. Yeah, so exports to Scotland up until the 1st of June, that's the current situation. They have to come from a farm that hasn't had Bluetongue virus in the previous 6 months. They have to be vaccinated. This is cattle I'm talking about. Vaccinated only with one particular vaccine is acceptable to Scotland, and that is Bultavo 3, and that's because it's been shown to prevent viremia in cattle. And I'm not going to go into all the technical details in these slides about the timing because it's so very complicated. But basically, they have to be vaccinated or have a negative PCR test within 7 days of export. And for pregnant cattle, there are additional serological requirements. At the minute, if you want to export sheep to Scotland, there are very few requirements. The only one being that they must not come from a farm where Bluetongue virus has been proven in the previous 6 months. Next slide, Stephen, please. And then we come to the summer after the vector active period starts. The new measures are planned to come in at the start of June. And for cattle, there will be no additional requirements on top of what is the current situation. For sheep, there are some additional requirements, and those are to do with pre-movement PCR testing. And also there's a recommendation for vaccination, but that doesn't negate the need for a PCR. So it really hinges around that pre-movement PCR testing. Next slide, please, Stephen. Now, if you want to move your animals to the EU, and that is very much subject to whether or not the country has published a derogation, similar to what has happened in Northern Ireland or by the south. Exports to direct slaughter, those are permitted without precondition, except for farms which have had a recent case. Exports for breeding and production, those are subject to the derogations. You can find all of the derogations published on the EU Commission website. If you just search for EU Commission Bluetongue, you'll find all the various derogations, and there's great variability between countries as to the conditions that they insist on to allow the movement of susceptible livestock to them. And you can't move to a country unless it has actually published a derogation. Next slide, Stephen, please. And yeah, just a thought about imports. It is still the case that livestock cannot enter Northern Ireland from GB. This is due to the restrictions imposed by EU law and the fact that there are serovars or serotypes in England that are not currently in Northern Ireland. So they have had outbreaks of other serotypes within the last couple of years. Next slide, please. Now, germinal product, if you are interested in the export and trade of germinal product, I advise that you consult our website and perhaps have a chat with Heather Boyd, who is our expert in this area. Exports are permitted from Northern Ireland to GB, And there is a difference whenever you're moving germinal product as to when it was collected. So if it was collected before the 30th September, the requirements are much less than if it was collected on or after the 30th of September, when there's a possibility that we may already have had infection, and donors then have to be tested with serology and PCR. And also, it is not possible to export fresh germinal product to GB as things stand. So that's moves to GB. Next one, product to EU. Again, there is the difference between the requirements for stuff collected before the 30th of September and stuff collected thereafter. And they are actually very similar conditions to what apply to moves to GB. And you can see there that the options to be attested to on the export health certificate are defined. But if you have any questions over this, and particularly if it's something new for you, I do recommend that farmers consult your vets. Vets have a chat with Heather Boyd, who is our expert on the team. And next slide. Oh yeah, rest of the world. Well, rest of the world's much more variable depending on where you want to send the germinal product. And it really is case by case. What people need to do is go to the DAERA form finder. You can Google DAERA form finder, and you find the certificates which have to be completed to enable you to send germinal product to various countries all around the world. And listed on there are all the conditions that will apply in those circumstances. And yeah, just a final note, and it applies to everything that I've said. If you have any queries about the ability to move livestock or germinal products, please contact us, DAERA Trade Exports. You'll find our email address on the DAERA website, and we'll be happy to give you advice and guidance if you contact us. I think that's it for me, Stephen. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Julian, and good work by the team. We're half an hour into this, and I suppose from my own point of view, concentration is very important to keep going. So I'll not keep you very much longer, but want to talk to you about vaccination. So next slide, please. Stephen, vaccination. Well, the first thing we'll say is that vaccination, speak to your own vet, and I'll maybe say that a few times. Every vet practitioner will have their own views and knowledge and understanding of your own farm. It's really important to speak to your own vet, because if you're going to be exporting anything which requires a vaccination status, then they'll be the people who need to complete the certificate, and they'll need to be confident about how the vaccination has been recorded, and they'll be looking to your records for that proof. An overview of vaccination in Great Britain: vets have reported vaccination of about 1.5 million, 1,680,000 animals. In Wales, vets have reported just over 250,000 animals being vaccinated. In Scotland, 182,000 vaccines have been recorded, and here nearly 250,000 animals have been are recorded as being prescribed vaccine. I don't think all of those animals have been vaccinated yet. I think at the moment we're kind of running about 50-50 from cattle and sheep. Maybe some farmers have bought the vaccine and they're waiting a little bit later until they're going to administer it. But that's roughly where we are. So we know there's a fair few animals out there which haven't been vaccinated yet. And I guess now that we're entering the vector active period, this is probably the time when farmers, if they're going to vaccinate, maybe really need to start thinking about their policy. So next slide, please. Vaccination. Look, vaccination is an insurance. It's not an absolute guarantee that you're not going to get infection. And for these Bluetongue vaccines, they will reduce the clinical signs and the severity, and they lower mortality. But there's no guarantee that they'll stop your farm getting Bluetongue. We know Bluetongue is here. It's here to stay. It will be here forever. The lifelong immunity that actual natural infection gives is very strong. But in the first year, if you haven't got your animals vaccinated, and I guess from that on afterwards, younger animals, you'd need to be vaccinating every year after that. You know, if you don't do that, then you are taking a risk with your herd health. Deciding to vaccinate again, I'll say, is a matter for you to make in consultation with your vet. There are 3 vaccines available in Northern Ireland. Currently, we've been given indication that there's plenty of vaccine available, so supply is not an issue. And from today, we have changed our policy on the vaccination availability. Anyone can go and get a vaccine from now on from their vet directly. That's because we have provided a general license on our website, which you can download. There will be conditions on that license that you will have to maintain and ensure that you, for example, record the use of the vaccine in your medicine book. And if we ask for those records, that we will be able to see them in time. If we were to do that, it's very unlikely that in future we will need to look for that information. But if we did need to have it, you would need to keep in accordance with the conditions of that general license. And part of that is because in terms of the UK, Northern Ireland is considered to be in a restricted zone still for Bluetongue. So next slide, please, Stephen. Yes, the department is not a salesperson for vaccination. Let me put that straight on the record. We do, as veterinarians, recognise vaccination as a very important tool in ensuring your herd health. In terms of Bluetongue, the jury is out in terms of how effective the Bluetongue 3 vaccine is, but it has been shown to have had a very good effect where it's been used in challenge. There is a very useful battle Bluetongue part of the AHDB, that's the Agriculture and Horticultural Development Board, which is an industry group in Great Britain. Many of you be aware of it. You can go onto the website and download what they call Bluetongue calculator, which for all the for the dairy, the beef and the sheep sector, and you put in kind of rough details about your farm, how many animals you have, how many young animals you have, how much milk you're producing, etc. And it will give you a readout in terms of whether vaccination is going to be effective for your business. And I mean, I did just a brief look at it, and I mean, maybe it's the way that it's designed, but in every single scenario, it demonstrates that from a very minimal effect of Bluetongue on your farm to the most severe effect of Bluetongue that could come. In every single scenario, vaccination pays dividends and will save you money. So it is a bit of a gamble not to vaccinate, I guess, if you were to believe those figures that are produced on the HDB, which again I would say is independent of industry of the department. They're an industry body which is designed to support the agriculture community. So if you're to believe those there, you would be best very strongly considering vaccinating for Bluetongue. And the biggest outlay will of course be in the first couple of years. How will the disease progress in Northern Ireland? No one really knows yet. I mean, we certainly have seen the patterns across Europe and in Great Britain. In Holland, it hit their country very hard, very, very early on. They had no warning and they had significant losses. In Great Britain, has been much more of a slow burn. But we have seen the disease has spread pretty much throughout Great Britain, apart from Scotland. There wouldn't be very many areas of England and Wales, I would say, that isn't affected now. The disease reports we've had from listening to the AHDB forum on Bluetongue, you know, for example, last year, sheep farmers were reporting reductions in their fertility and fecundity when they were scanning their sheep. So everything from poor fertility right up to the full-blown disease picture that Ignatius has shown. We're not necessarily anticipating in the very early start of the year to see much in the way of the really severe disease picture. But as we all know, these diseases, they can be working on your business without you necessarily understanding that they're there. And that was the picture we saw in the herds where we've picked it up so far in Northern Ireland. Most of the farms believe their animals were perfectly healthy, and they were very, very well run farms. So, Glenn, I think we've kind of come to an end of our presentation. Hopefully, we can answer any questions, and we will go on. How long does the vaccine need to be administered prior to breeding to protect pregnancy? I guess that's a good question. I can't say I necessarily know the answer to that. Do any of my guys, Ignatius, I'll ask you, maybe you'd have a fairly good idea.
Ignatius, are you there?
Maybe you're on mute, Ignatius.
Apologies everywhere or everybody.
You're right.
Just having issues with communications and tools. But no, I think the first question, or to supply an answer to the first question, the response of animals to Bluetongue is very variable. I would reckon that probably young animals are most severely affected, plus those animals which are, again, suffering some kind of debilitation, obviously will be worse affected than animals which are in the fullness of health. So basically, any animals which are stressed will be affected more by Bluetongue than animals which aren't stressed to the same extent or whatever. So I think it would just depend. There's a lot of variabilities in that particular question, but I think the most important part is it depends on the individual animal, depends whether it's under any stress, and I think that's basically the only way we can answer that particular question.
I guess, Ignatius, there was a question, and I was it's maybe you were just slightly offline there about vaccination, and the question was, how long do you have to get your animals vaccinated before they're pregnant? And I suppose that it's a slightly strange question when you stop and think about it. I don't think any of the vaccines have a contraindication for vaccinating your animals while they are pregnant. So that from that point of view, using the vaccine while they're pregnant is safe. I think the only slight caveat to that is for breeding rams. They'd advise you not to vaccinate your rams before you go to the top, when they're going to be put in to serve. So that would be one caveat there. I mean, I guess the issue here is the sooner you get your animals vaccinated, even if they are pregnant, the sooner that they'll give you protection against the infection. Because that's the risk. Ignatius, maybe you've got anything further to say?
I suppose yes. The best thing is, depending on timing, is get your animals vaccinated before they become pregnant. Full immunity is reckoned to be 21 to 28 days after completion of the vaccine course. So if there are two vaccine shots required, it's 21 to 28 days after the second one. So the ideal would be that you would vaccinate your animals at least 28 days before they become pregnant. As you have said, David, there's no contraindications during pregnancy, but obviously during that period that they're not protected, obviously there is the potential for them to become infected by Bluetongue. So back to this idea of get your vaccinations done, work out when you need protection from, and I suppose at this particular stage we're now getting into the factor active period. So the sooner you vaccinate, the better. But those are the type of time scales that you should be looking at whenever you're considering vaccination.
Yes, and indeed we had a query from a member there because the question's not there. Much the same, Ignatius, that you need to get your animals vaccinated in time, and because of the new suckler cow scheme, we had contacted the office in Brussels, and they basically said the same, that you need to be vaccinating that 21 or 28 days before you put the bull out, really. And that's something, because of the new suckler cow scheme, where the cow has to be calving on the set days. That's something that farmers need to be mindful of. You just don't vaccinate her and then put the bull out and expect her to be served and hold as in calf, because there has been areas where the animal has been AI'd or it's served with a bull and probably returned more often than should have been.
I suppose, Glenn, just to add, reinforce the point about it, is that again, there are some publicity in relation to the ill effects of vaccination, but they are nothing compared to the effects of the disease.
Yeah.
So yes, potentially there might be a very slight chance of some issues in relation to vaccination, but compared to Bluetongue and the Bluetongue protection, they just don't compare at all. So the answer would be, get your animals vaccinated. If possible, get them vaccinated before they become pregnant, and again before you use a ram or a breeding male as well. And those are the time scales.
And I think the other question we have covered here is vaccinating your pregnant cows. You can still do that, but preferably you'd be better to vaccinate before they get pregnant.
It's a question of vaccinate before they get pregnant. If they're pregnant now, you don't have that choice. So yes, vaccinate them before the Bluetongue season is really underway.
Yeah.
And again, you will be protected from that time.
Yeah. And there's another question here. How long will the vaccine protection last? And is an annual booster required or a full vaccination each year?
Well, the answer to that is that work hasn't been published yet, Glenn. If the Bluetongue vaccine does the same as the other Bluetongue vaccines, it basically should last for a year, but that isn't officially present yet. So we don't have the answer to that particular question.
Yeah. Another question just for you. It's not in the box. It's just out of my own head here. On the animals that had Bluetongue here, Ignatius, clinical signs really didn't show. Am I right in saying that?
That's correct. All the animals which were positive for Bluetongue, basically the farmer reported there were no clinical signs, and they were just found as a result of serological testing.
Yeah. Don't know if I've answered this question or not, but does the BTV3 affect animals of all ages with equal severity?
Again, as I say, we've kind of half answered that one, Glenn.
Yeah.
It will depend on the individual animal, and yes, normally the younger the animal, the more severely it is affected by viral diseases, and the more stressed the animal is, the worse it will be affected by a viral disease. So generally, with Bluetongue, that will also hold as well.
Yeah. Have you any more questions for you?
Well, I see there's one there. If you've had an animal with Bluetongue, how long does that natural immunity last? The current thought is that the immunity from if an animal becomes infected with Bluetongue is extremely long, and in a lot of cases it will be for the lifetime of the animal.
Yeah.
And I suppose the last question there, can I vaccinate the bull that I'm currently using? Again, I think the information coming from the vaccine companies, and again, check that out with your own PVP. But the answer is try and avoid, or it's a balance between what's the risk of becoming infected and getting severe clinical signs of Bluetongue, which will more than mask what would happen, in relation to the side effects of the vaccine.
Yep.
And I suppose the last question there, when is the best time to vaccinate March, lamb and ewes? Is there any need? Well, for March, lamb and ewes, basically you're going to be putting them to the ram in October, October, November, and we do know at this particular stage that the midge is active at that particular time. So yes, those animals potentially could become infected, could be affected with Bluetongue, and Bluetongue probably the Bluetongue can cause clinical signs in the ewes, and again can affect the fertility and the lambing percentage of those particular ewes. So my view is yes, it is worth protecting those ewes as well.
And what happens if we, I know it was explained there, but what happens if we get a different strain here? Where do we go on exports till live lambs till through Scotland and into England? Is there much change, do you think, or will there be different restrictions put on us for another if there comes another type of BTV?
Sorry,
Sorry,
I'll bring Julian in here just because he's our trade expert and has been involved in a lot of those discussions. I guess while he's getting unmuted, my understanding would be that yes, because Bluetongue 8 is present in Great Britain, we would still be able to access the markets in England and Wales. But Julian will explain. It'll probably take a bit longer than just an overnight solution.
No, I think that's right. But it would require a negotiation and discussions with the relevant governments at the time. So it is hard to predict exactly what the response would be, but I think what David is saying is correct, that it really depends what strains are present in the recipient territories and what they demand in terms of protection from risk from us. So it's hard to be absolutely specific. We had this problem before we got Bluetongue, that we made numerous attempts to establish with our trading partners what they would actually require if we were to contract the infection. And it was impossible to tie them down because they wanted to have a better understanding of what they were facing, in terms of how widespread our outbreak was, and what strain it was. So all of these things just need to be worked out come the time.
I've got another couple of questions that I found here. Given that suckler farmers are been only really made aware of all the issues and caveats around the Bluetongue now, and the very tight turnaround between spring calving and rebreeding, should the 21-day extension on the calving interval in the DAERA suckler scheme be changed this year? And I think we've sort of touched on that before, that you may not be fit to answer this question, but there is some uncertainty over the vaccine needs to be put in at the right time, and there is some uncertainty over that. And I think we have asked that question to the department over that as a union. I don't know what you think there, David.
I don't think we've probably just had the conversation, and we'll be thinking about it. I mean, I guess veterinary service only advise farming group there in terms of the awards of schemes and everything. I mean, I guess look, people have known about Bluetongue coming, I suppose, for the last couple of years. We knew it was here in November. I guess the concept about the vaccine actually causing poor fertility is, I haven't seen any scientific evidence on that. There might be some evidence that I haven't seen. But look, I mean, it will be one of these things that the department will consider. It would be wrong to give a definitive answer on it at this point.
How stable is the vaccine? We are calving over the next 6 weeks and need to administer vaccine in small batches.
Glenn, well, my assumption is that basically, are we talking here about if you open the bottle, how long does it last?
Yeah, yep.
10 hours, I think is the official answer.
So yes, you need to be.
Once you open it, you have to use it.
Yeah, so you need to be timing the bottle to the size of batches of the number of cattle you have to vaccinate, basically.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. Is there any issues with importing semen from Europe?
Julian, or maybe Philip, you're the import man.
I'm not sure if Philip's coming on. Imports are not my domain. Oh, you're on, Philip.
Yeah, got it now. Sorry, too many buttons to press. Yeah, it will depend. Once again, it's one of these very open-ended questions with no set answer. It will depend upon the country that it is coming from, what the Bluetongue picture is within that country, and any potential measures which the exporting animals, which the germinal products are being exported from, are potentially tested or not. So there's not a one size answer fits all here, and certainly if anybody's any specific questions, then certainly we're happy to run it through with you. As Julian mentioned, there's a DAERA Trade exports box. There's also a DAERA Trade imports email, and certainly happy to take any specific questions. But I think we could end up talking all night about 50 different scenarios, so we'll just take a specific question on that one, Glenn, if anybody's interested.
Okay, Philip. Does the vaccine give the unborn lamb any cover?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. Now, there will be maternal immunity passed down through the colostrum. It will last for a few weeks, but it will it'll start to wane after that. So yes, it will provide some cover. The length of time that it will provide the cover basically will be variable and difficult to determine.
Vaccinating a dairy herd, do you need to vaccinate the young stock too?
Yes, the answer would be yes again. I mean, as we go on, and again, every farm will have midges, and over the next few years, all the older animals will, if they've been vaccinated and they get an additional natural immunity, they will be fairly safe for the rest of their lives. So I would envisage a picture that coming 2, 3, 4 years, farmers won't be vaccinating older animals, but every year I would imagine they would need to vaccinate their younger animals, because it will be their younger animals at that point which will have the poorer immunity. And I mean, when you get to that stage then too, you will have a lot higher concentration of Bluetongue in the natural midge population, and the potential severity of the disease could be a lot worse. So that's when you will start seeing the bad pictures that Ignatius showed at the start of the presentation.
Yeah, and the next question is much the same as an animal that does herd immunity cannot pass the immunity to its offspring.
There is the maternal immunity, passed on, and again it'll last variable in the offspring.
Is there any treatments for preventing the midges like poron, etc., to put on livestock to try and keep them away as best we can?
The simple answer is that there are porons available, but our entomologists tell us that they're not very effective.
Yeah. What other measures should be taken during the vector period other than the vaccine, fly ear tags or fly zappers?
Again, same answer, Glenn.
Yeah.
They provide some cover, but the current thought is that they're not very effective in preventing midge attack.
Has there been many reports in cattle with abortions or birth defects following the cattle getting Bluetongue?
The simple answer to that is there are plenty of reports of infertility problems, where we've got early embryonic death. Plenty of reports of malformed fetuses, these dummy calves, which are born, basically with brain defects. As far as numbers goes and as far as proportions are concerned, we haven't seen any definitive picture in relation to that, Glenn. But yes, there have been plenty of reports and plenty of anecdotal reports in relation.
But not in Northern Ireland so far, Ignatius. That would be fair to say.
No, not Northern
no,
Ireland.
We're talking about Great Britain,
Yeah,
not in Northern Ireland so far.
There has been some down south, has there not?
And there has been some down south as well. Yeah. Some down south, some across in GB, and some across in mainland Europe. But as David says, none so far in Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Is there the earliest age you can vaccinate a lamb or a cow? Would it matter?
Again, if you need to check the data sheet for that information. The different vaccines have slightly different ages that you can vaccinate from.
If breeding animals were to contact bluetongue during the high-risk season in the summer, how long is a typical recovery period, and are they likely to have recovered prior to the autumn breeding? I suppose that'd be either sheep or cattle.
Yeah. Well,
Probably sheep.
some of them, yeah. Well, the important thing to remember is some of them will have died. So basically, there'll be no breeding potential for them. Some of them will have no signs at all and be no issues, in relation to the autumn. And then you'll have the in-between ones. And again, that runs the whole gamut from just a bit off colour to right through to those severe signs which are shown in the picture. So basically, you've got the whole gamut of possibilities. And I suppose, again, to provide yourself with ease of mind and everything else, basically advice would be, again, subject to consultation with your own PVP, is get them vaccinated.
Yeah.
So the only thing I add to that then too, Ignatius, is that some animals can be viremic for quite a while. And when they're viremic, they're very unlikely to be fertile. They'll actually test positive for a very, very long time. Some of them maybe up to 6 months. They'll test positive for virus, although we don't think they'll be viremic during that time. But so the viremia has maybe been recorded maybe a month or so. It's a very long viremia in some cases.
Yeah. I know maybe you can't answer this question, but any preference in the actual vaccine used?
Yes, the simple answer is we can't vaccinate it. I was just looking on the website. David has already mentioned the AHDB organization or whatever it is, and they have a vaccine comparator, as part of their website. So basically, if you want to check out the different claims made by the different vaccines, if you could get onto that website, and they have it in a nice chart as to what the different vaccines claim and what you need to do.
I suppose if the cattle has been vaccinated for bluetongue, would it be wise to use other vaccines along at the same time for ease of handling for blackleg or ammonia or exacta, or would it be just better to just do the bluetongue vaccine and then come back to other ones later on?
I don't think there's any contraindications to giving them 2 different vaccines at the one time, but normally you're better to do one thing at a time, Glenn.
Yeah.
And I suppose really the main arbiter of that would be discuss that with your PVP.
Yeah. I see another bit in here about the size of the dose packages. So far, I think the smallest dose in Northern Ireland is a 20 dose bottle. Is there, would the companies, do you think, could we push them for smaller dose packs for smaller farmers, or are you happy enough that 2 farmers could share the same pack?
Absolutely, Glenn. This general license and making it more freely available will facilitate that behavior. And when I remember I was in practice, as a practice, you'd have farmers who were coming in and 2 or 3 on the same day. And because the practice could separate the bottles out, and put them in small doses for that allows it to be used in a lot more an efficient way, So I don't think we'll get much purchase asking the manufacturers to make them in smaller doses, but I think there will be practical solutions found.
That would be very useful that we could do that, because if your cooperation with your neighbours would be the thing there, you could do that, and it will cut down the cost on the particular farmer. It says here that it's supposed to be the same dose rate for a cow and a ewe. I suppose that's on the type of the vaccine that you would be purchasing. I would say you'd have to read the label.
It depends on the vaccine, and I think sheep have a slightly higher dose compared to cattle, compared to the size of them and things like that. But again, just check the data sheet and it'll tell you the dose rates.
Yeah. No more questions. So I think unless if there's anything else more to add there, tell us.
No, I think we're fine. As Nicola said, as and when more information is needed by industry, we'll stand ready to try and keep you up to date. I guess one of the things, just as a bit of an interest, is we will be thinking about the need for post-import testing if animals come from Europe. At the moment, we're pleased to say that there hasn't been any imported animals from Europe since the derogation. But we are really worried and concerned about, as Ignatius and Julian mentioned, some really nasty diseases that are out there.
Yeah.
So we'll need to keep ourselves. We're entering a slightly different time now. We've enjoyed a period of pretty much splendid isolation in terms of threats for disease, but it's a very uncertain time, and just be reinforcing those messages from Ignatius that, if farmers see any disease that they really are uncertain about, they've never seen before, very shocked about, don't hesitate but to call us, and we'll get our staff out to have a look.
I think one of the things that we as a union have sort of told our members is to think wisely before you go looking sourcing stock out there, and consider what you may bring with you. And certainly a rigorous testing program would be the thing. And I think ROI is in the same boat. So, we're all, as an island now, we're all in the same boat here. So I would encourage all farmers to consider what they do and where, if they need to import livestock or what, and definitely go through a rigorous process if they have to get them. But definitely be as a need, but not as a just something that they shouldn't really consider other options before they do that, I think.
Yeah, Glenn, I'll just back that up from a trade imports point of view. I always say to everybody, just because you can do it doesn't mean it's a good idea. So yes, in theory, you may be able to avail of the derogation and bring stuff in from continental Europe. It does not mean it's a good idea to do.
No, definitely not. There's too many things out there, and I actually got thing sent to me the other night, or last night, in fact, of foot and mouth out in Russia, possible cases of it. So there's a lot of things out there we don't really want. And as an island, we're sort of fortunate that way. Some say we're cursed in some ways having an island, but it's sometimes when you tend to keep disease out, it's very, very useful. So it is. So thank you all for coming on tonight, and thank the department here for putting this on, and we were more than able to host it and get it out to our members. And so thank you all for that, and hopefully that we don't have much problems with it, but talk to your vets, consult with them, and hopefully they will give you the proper advice. And as I said one other night there, talk to your vet, and if he's not sure on that advice you've got, go and talk to another vet, and that hopefully that between the two of them will get you there. So thank you very much, and good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.